Okay, well, welcome to this month's update. This is in lieu of our regular meetings that we normally have in Ocala and up in Gainesville. We figured that instead of asking you to come to the meeting, we'd bring the meeting to you. So this is, I think, a more efficient way of doing it. As you can see, Randy's with us, so we can get a report, as we usually do, from AFFT. And then Elaine and I will give you a few things that are going on in the rest of the area and Florida. So take it away, Randy.
Okay, for Florida Congressional Districts 3 and 6, I want to touch on basically 3 topics. And these all are national in scope, but they will be affecting Florida directly. First, there are 2 very strong statewide, state-level FAIRtax bills that we hope will put FAIRtax on the map in 2020. The Alabama bill is prepared for filing. Their session is ending, or may have already ended by now. So it will be filed again in 2020. And it has a new study backing it that basically says by taking their sales tax up by roughly 1.5 cents and expanding the base of things that it taxes, they can eliminate their state income tax, and they can have a prebate function that will offset the tax on a certain level of spending. So I'm hoping that at some point the guys on FAIRtax Power Radio, Mr. Malero and Mr. Paxton, will have Chuck Bailey, who is the state director for Alabama, and Phil Henson, who is the legislative liaison for the Georgia FAIRtax organization, to their state legislature on FAIRtax Power Radio, so they can really go into the details on not only the studies involved.
That's a good idea.
And they can explain how state and local tax sales taxes that are directly affected are going to have to be coordinated in these 2 states, and that's how one of the bigger hang-ups is being brought up, that these local jurisdictions, the cities, don't want to have their funding impaired by a state fair tax. So that's something that Chuck Bailey and Phil Henson could talk about.
That's a good topic to handle.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Now, the second thing I want to talk about is Congress. And if on the national level, we've made a decision from a strategic standpoint that the first year of the 116th Congress is pretty much dead in the water.
Yeah.
We know that in 2021, Rob Woodall is going to retire. He's been the primary FAIRtax House sponsor for 12 years, I believe, might be longer than that, might be 14. He succeeded John Linder, who was his old boss. And Congressman Woodall has decided not to run for re-election in 2020. So there will be a new Georgia 7th Congressional District congressman, and the necessity for a new House FAIRtax sponsor. We also have been undertaking a search for a Senate FAIRtax sponsor. In the 114th and 115th Congresses, we had Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas. And the reason Senator Moran was picked was because he held an insider position in the Senate Republican caucus on fundraising. He was very key to Senate Republican fundraising efforts, and because of that, there was a decision made to have Senator Moran as the primary Senate sponsor. He has not worked out as a Senate sponsor. So we are in the process of trying to shift the Senate sponsor.
Because as we know, promoting the FAIRtax could turn into a full-time job.
It definitely could, and it certainly requires someone who is willing to put out both the effort in the Senate, which is one thing, but the effort on national media, which is more important than probably the effort in the Senate itself. So right now there's on the national level, there's a discussion and a search to try and get a Senate sponsor that would be one of three. These are my personal selections. The first one of the three is David Perdue. And the reason David Purdue's under consideration is he succeeded the original Senate sponsor in Georgia, whose name just shot straight out of my head.
Chambliss?
Yes, Saxby Chambliss.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ron. And David Perdue succeeded Saxby Chambliss. David Perdue's uncle, Sonny Perdue, is the current Department of Agriculture head in the Trump administration and former governor of Georgia. And the David Perdue is very close to President Trump. He and President Trump communicate regularly. He's played golf with President Trump on a number of occasions, and we know that he has brought the FAIRtax up and discussed it at some point with the president and the vice president.
Yeah, we need somebody like that.
My second personal choice is someone who Ron and I saw when he was running for Senate in August, and that's Rick Scott. And he committed to us that he was a FAIRtax supporter.
Yeah.
And
it's been for a long time.
If there is one state that's going to be key to the Trump re-election, it's going to be Florida. And if there's one senator in Florida, it's Rick Scott, who knows the politics in the state, who's close with Governor DeSantis, who is also a former FAIRtax co-sponsor. And Rick Scott, I think personally, I think Rick Scott could be an excellent FAIRtax sponsor. And he does have media experience, and I think he would take the time to do it if he agreed to do it. The third choice that's being discussed, and we've been trying to get a meeting with this senator since February, or actually late January, and he's a senator who is not particularly close to President Trump, and they've differed on some things. Senator Ben Sasse from Nebraska. Now, the reason we've talked about possibly getting Senator Sasse is he's young, has a lot of media experience. The media on both sides of the fence seem to like him. And he's someone, being from Nebraska, who would be a completely new, fresh face for FAIRtax. My concern about Senator Sasse is, one, he doesn't seem to have as much interest as we thought he would have. And two, he would be like training somebody from the very beginning, from scratch, on FAIRtax.
And not so with Rick Scott.
Not so with Rick Scott, and not so with David Perdue.
Yeah.
David Perdue in particular, the Georgia FAIRtax group provided him with a complete working book that had all of the research, it had all of the terminology, it had concrete examples of how FAIRtax would work and how it would affect the average taxpayer in Georgia. And he literally campaigned on it using that book.
That's good.
And there's some photographs of him with his FAIRtax resource book going around Georgia during his campaign.
That's good. Wish more would do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Senator Perdue, I believe, is up for re-election, if I recall correctly, in 2020. Senator Scott is not. He would not be re-elected until 2022 or 2024.
24, yeah.
He was elected in 2018. Now, we do have a senator who would be up for election in 2022 who ran for president in 2016 and lost to President Trump. I think he was described as Little Marco, if I remember right, by the president.
Yeah.
And
unfortunately, Senator Rubio, has shied away from the fair tax, even though he spoke very warmly about it during his Senate campaign the first time. We attended several of his campaign stops, and he liked the fair tax then. Unfortunately, he hasn't done anything about it since he's been in the Senate.
No, since he went to the Senate, he doesn't even utter the words.
And there is some video he was then Speaker Rubio, if I remember correctly, of the Florida legislature, running against Charlie Crist in the Republican primary. And there's some video of him talking about how much he liked the fair tax. But his pat out, if you want to call it that, was always, well, you would have to repeal the 16th Amendment first. And that's just flat false. You do not have to repeal the 16th Amendment in order to bring the fair tax law in effect to repeal the income tax code, because the 16th Amendment does not create the income tax. It simply authorizes Congress to tax directly without apportionment all forms of income. So you can repeal 26 United States Code, which is the Internal Revenue Act, and there is no income tax at that point. It doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's right.
And then with the enactment of the fair tax, you could work on repealing the 16th Amendment. And you'd have 7 years to repeal it before the fair tax would actually sunset.
And there's a sunset clause in there. If for some reason the 16th Amendment is not repealed, then the fair tax goes away and Congress has to come up with another taxing scheme.
Correct.
That's right.
That's not really a proper issue. But
after living under the fair tax, I can't see anybody wanting to go back to the income tax.
Good point.
Well, there's that. Yeah, I mean, once people get used to no payroll tax deduction, not having to file a tax return, and then at the first day of year 4, there's a huge celebration that goes on because the IRS has been unfunded and totally gone.
Yeah. Yep.
How is it that some politician is going to turn around then in year 3 and say, bring back payroll deduction, bring back federal tax filing, and save the IRS?
You need to watch the newest FAIRtax Power Radio, because Bob and Ron played that.
Yeah.
They did.
We role played that scenario. That will air on May 22nd. Yes, May 22nd for the first time.
Well,
we're going to talk about that later.
I can just imagine, walking around, some politician handing out signs that says "Save our IRS."
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Tomatoes being flown.
Somehow the terms tar and feathers come to mind.
It's literally political suicide for somebody to run on saving the IRS. The last item I wanted to touch on is the overall strategy of grassroots and grassroots development and grassroots coordination. Because up until 2011, 2012, it was a complete top-down strategy for fair tax national, Americans for Fair Taxation. And that predates my involvement in national fair tax by a year or so. So some of what I'm talking about is a little bit of history. But from the founding of Americans from Fair Taxation in the 1990s, it was always closely held, closely run and directed from Houston, Texas, by the group of businessmen that founded it, and they hired and paid staff to literally be an executive organization focused on Washington, D.C. And they were focused on sponsors, they were focused on lobbying, they were focused on everything but grassroots development. And as is my understanding that over the years that produced a lot of friction. Like a decision made in 2007 to take 83 buses into Iowa and go on a bus tour around Iowa, which was apparently decided by one of the executive directors in order to highlight the FAIRtax as part of Mike Huckabee's campaign in 2007 for the Republican nomination, even though they couldn't endorse him. Everywhere Huckabee went, there were FAIRtax buses that were there full of FAIRtax supporters. But those kind of decisions and spending decisions and effort were all made in Houston, and they were all coordinated by executive directors. I think there were 3.
Yeah.
The last one was Cindy Cannavaro, who was a really good executive, but she was hired and paid based upon funding that was literally coming from a group of people that could and did write 6-figure checks. And when that ended, the transition occurred between 2012 and 2013 to an interim directors, or not yet directors, but an interim working committee that then created the setup for the current AFFT, the Americans for Fair Taxation, which is a group of state delegates and selected from the state delegates a group of 9 directors. And the transition has really been, let's build the state organizations. Let's focus on grassroots development. And there's several things that we've been doing to accomplish that. One is Jim Bennett, who, having now retired from his legal career, has volunteered as the grassroots coordinator. And Mr. Bennett is taking a lot of time and effort to know what's going on in each state, to work with the state directors, to find volunteers, to promote things like involvement in the Chamber of Commerce, involvement in churches, things that are not going to be necessarily competing political type activities. And for quite a while we were trying to coalition with groups that were literally nonprofits that were involved in fundraising for their own efforts. And there's always a point at which every nonprofit says, well, I'm not going to have my supporters be donating to some other organization.
Yeah, we've seen that.
Yes,
So
we have, unfortunately.
that's been the problem with trying to coalition with Tea Party groups and with Convention of States and a few others, is they want to guard their support base so that they can get donations to have the resources to promote their policy, their effort, political effort. And FAIRtax is much the same way. So what I've started doing is looking beyond political groups, ones that are purely political, and start looking at business groups and even non-political groups like AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, which is the flip side of the coin to the AARP. AARP is a very, very liberal group. They were heavily involved, if not receiving a huge benefit from the creation of Obamacare. And a lot of people became so disgusted with AARP that they looked for a conservative alternative. And in 2010, I believe it was, Dan Weber, who has some insurance benefits type companies, created out of his own efforts and his own resources AMAC, and AMAC has grown to 2 million members in a span of about 5 years, from about 2000, about 7 years actually, 2012 to 2019. It's nowhere near the size of AARP yet, but their plans for growth are very serious. They and Mr. Weber is committed to conservative causes. He's committed to having a focus on stabilizing and saving Social Security and Medicare. And they're now have their own political action committee. It's called AMAC Action. Oh. And AMAC Action has 2 full-time lobbyists in Washington, a political director in Florida. She's an attorney. Her name's Jennifer Bankston. She is coordinating all of the AMAC Action work between the AMAC members and their AMAC PAC, and they've set up a series of chapters in each congressional district. Has 1 or more chapter, and each congressional district has a delegate, a congressional delegate. And so what they're trying to do is have, for example, 27 congressional delegates in Florida.
1 for each district.
Correct. And they just hit their 20th congressional delegate in Florida. They have 7, mainly in South Florida, that they're still filling those roles. And they're adding congressional delegates in every state in the United States.
Wow.
And they hold an annual conference for their delegates and chapter presidents. And it started in Florida in Howey in the Hills, 2016, 2017.
Yes, we were there.
They have booths where AMAC vendors or sponsors can have a booth. FAIRtax had a booth for 2 years, 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
They had about 80 people the first year and about 90 or 100 the second year. Well, the third year they went to San Antonio, Texas, and they now have decided they want to pick places of historical interest to have their AMAC delegate conferences. So San Antonio was 2018, and among the speakers at these conferences, they try to have media personalities and authors that are relevant to AMAC members and the conservative beliefs that the members have. In 2018, Colonel Allen West was the keynote speaker.
Good.
And he brought a lot of time and effort. He was there for over a day. He had dinner there the night before the keynote address, and was there throughout the day on the day of the keynote address. And he gave a very stirring keynote address. And he had a book like most people who are celebrities do, and he was available for personalizing and signing books. And one of our great Florida District 3 FAIRtax supporters, Nick Rudelick. Am I saying Rudelick correct or
Rudelick?
Rudelick. Yeah.
Rudelick.
Yeah.
He had actually met Colonel West and known him when both were back in the military. And I was able to get a personalized book from Colonel West.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And and when I explained that to Colonel West, he let me videotape him with a message to Nick.
Wow.
And we provided Nick and Barb with the message from Colonel West and the autographed personalized book.
Great.
So in 2019, the keynote speaker was Dinesh D'Souza, who I think Ron particularly is familiar with and likes. So I was able to get a personalized book from Dinesh D'Souza.
Look at this.
Death of a Nation. And if you know anything about his career, he was one of the few people ever charged with campaign finance violations and prisoned by the former administration.
Yeah.
And he told us a lot about what that experience was like. and he's produced some truly awesome documentaries about the United States.
He even included that in one of his documentaries.
And he did.
Yes, he
and
did.
so I had an opportunity to chat with him about the FAIRtax. He said, I'm familiar with it. I'm not familiar enough with it. I'd like to know more about it. And I was telling him that our Florida State president was a fan of his. And so he personalized an autographed copy of his book for
Great.
Ron and Elaine.
Well,
And
really
that gives
appreciate
us some
that.
work ahead of us.
Yeah, I think so.
right. And I do have contact information, and
Right.
we'll be reaching out to him.
Because I'm pretty sure that once he understands it, he'll demand
He'll demand it. Yes.
Absolutely.
Where have I
So,
heard that before?
Yeah. I picked it up somewhere.
yes.
Oh, okay.
So, but the real focus from this point forward for the national organization is build the grassroots, strengthen our state efforts, get a state fair tax bill in the news and passed by at least half, if not a complete state legislature, and get it signed by a governor and get it going by 2021.
Well, we do have the memorial to sort of beat the legislature over the head with. I mean, it is the policy of the state of Florida to support the fair tax. So let's get a fair tax statewide bill.
And I've always made that argument is that every member of the Florida congressional delegation needs to be on the record saying
Yes, they do.
that they are aware of Senate Memorial 118, that they've read it, and that they either support it and agree with it, or that for whatever stated reason they feel like they don't have to agree with it, and get them on the
only the
record.
I sent
We need
all
those two
27
senators, too.
representatives here in Florida a letter including a copy of the memorial in January.
Yes,
so they
yeah.
have it.
Yes,
Well, their staff has it.
their staff and
They better have it, but
Yeah.
hopefully,
Yes.
at least their staff has it.
right. So with a governor who was a fair tax co-sponsor, a senator who's committed, at least verbally, to supporting the fair tax, I think Florida could be the tip of the spear going into
That would be
2020 and 2021.
That would be good. So we got our work cut out for us.
Oh, definitely.
And if you want to send me questions or comments about this update, if you want it shorter or less detailed, or complaints, send them to Randy Fisher with a
Any
C.
complaints, go to him, not
Yes.
to us. It's just to him.
Randy Fisher at fairtax.org. And I'll be happy to respond to whatever you send me.
You'll see that right down here.
Yep.
Okay. Like I said, this is a video meeting in lieu of the physical meetings that we used to have in Ocala and Gainesville. And if this format seems to work, then maybe we'll do this for the whole state. But this is kind of an experiment right now. So let's go over what happened with FAIRtax Power Radio. As you probably know, Bob and I have been doing FAIRtax Power Radio podcasts for a long time, and about a year ago this time, we were invited by Big Daddy Studios in Gainesville to do a weekly digital TV show, which we did, and they chose the time of 11:30 on Wednesday morning for that video show. It was a new experience for Bob and I. Okay, well, recently, because of circumstances beyond our control, and I mean beyond the control of Big Daddy Studios and the FAIRtax guys, we had to part company with Big Daddy Studios.
Has something to do with the IRS.
Yes,
but
it
we
does.
won't get
It
into
does,
that.
but we're not going to get into it. It's not something that they wanted to do. It's not something we wanted to do, but it was forced upon us. And the board of directors of Florida FAIRtax Educational Association, 3 of whom are right here right now, and if you count Bob, that's 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're almost a quorum.
Almost.
decided that the show must go on, and they authorized the purchase of our own studio making. So, Elaine, why don't you tell them about what they see here?
Well, what you see here is this backdrop. We wanted to keep it as close to what the FAIRtax guys had at the studio. So we chose the wood paneling. And this actually is coming from my living room, which I am very happy when it's done, because then I can get my living room back.
Yeah.
But right now it's fine. But most everything is portable. So if we wanted to go somewhere to someone else's house to interview them or something like that, well, when we go to Oklahoma this month, we can take this camera and tripod with us. We can film it. We can post-production. We can do a lot of things. Ryan can do a lot of things, and don't look at me. He can do a lot of things. Post-production in order to get logos, that sort of thing up here on the
Websites,
screen.
email addresses.
The addresses, exactly. That's all post-production, and we don't have to stick to the 11:30 Wednesday morning time frame. We can put it out there whenever. We're basically just trying to figure out right now what would be the best time. So if you have suggestions, just give us a call or email us at ocalafairtax at icloud.com, and we can take your suggestions and see what works for the majority of the people.
Yep. And along with being on Facebook, we've been for the last almost a year now on facebook.com/FAIRtax, which is the AFFT's Facebook page. They have quite a following. So we've been live streaming our show there. Well, we're also on YouTube, and we can live stream to YouTube. We have our work cut out for us because we're not getting a lot of play on YouTube yet, but we will work on it. Yeah, we will work on it. Okay. So, and more about that, as we learn about this, as this whole TV thing. Hey, I was a high school science teacher. What do I know about TV production? Next to nothing, except that I have owned a camcorder in the past. That's about it. Okay.
Also, we've got the FAIRtax guys have their own website now.
Oh yeah, yep. And you'll see that down here, FAIRtaxGuys.com. Just FAIRtaxGuys.com. You don't need to join anything. You don't need to subscribe to anything. You can go there at any time, and you can check our latest episodes of FAIRtax Power Radio. There's a contact button. You can send us an email, make suggestions, ask questions, and so forth. Very simple, FAIRtaxGuys.com. So we encourage you to go there. We're trying to build up FAIRtax Power Radio so that it becomes a force in the country. It's a great, simple way for people to learn about the FAIRtax and to tell other people to watch it, because even if you don't watch it live, now the advantage of watching live is that the comments are live and you can type in a comment and we can respond to you. But if you can't watch it live, you can watch it anytime. It's a YouTube video, it's a Facebook post. You can watch it anytime. So that's the advantage to it.
And it can be a comment or a question.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
Most of the time I'm available to be online. I may not be on Wednesday's show this week, but we'll see how my travel schedule works out.
Yeah. Well, we will be, and then anyways. And the thing about Oklahoma, we'll tell you more about this next month, but Elaine and I and Bob and his wife Vicki are going out to Oklahoma. We have been invited by our friend Jade Wally, who we have mentioned before. He is a CPA, and he is from originally Oklahoma, and he teaches a summer class at Oklahoma State University, and he wants Bob and I to hold a panel discussion with his graduate level CPA students. This is going to be interesting because we're not CPAs. So anyways, we're going to, as Elaine said, we're going to take the camcorder, we're going to film that, we're going to make it part of FAIRtax Power Radio, and next month we'll report on how that went and maybe show you a little bit.
Yeah, so if you want to see the FAIRtax guys getting stumped, tune in.
Boy, yeah, that's pretty good. So, did we mention the new co-sponsor?
No, we didn't.
Okay, we have a new our 30th co-sponsor of HR 25. It's Garrett Palmer in Alabama. Thank you, Representative Palmer, and please put pressure on your colleagues and ask them to to also co-sponsor the FAIRtax. It's very important. A couple of things to finish up here. you can always, we encourage you, write letters to the editor. All right, you don't have to be.
People.
Pardon?
It reaches a lot of people.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's a lot of people. And not only that, it'll generate, because there's always somebody out there who thinks they have all the answers, and they try to comment on why the FAIRtax doesn't work. The FAIRtax works because, one, it's very simple. But when you put a letter to the editor, in the paper's website, there'll be these repeating comments. Well, that generates more interest. So,
and you don't have to subscribe to that paper in order to be able to, one, send a letter, and two, to be able to respond to those online comments.
Yeah. So, other ways that you can promote the FAIRtax, call your local talk shows. In our area, WSKY, the Bob Rose Show. Bob Rose is a FAIRtax supporter, somebody other than me can call into Bob Rose and talk about the FAIRtax, okay? So there's always social media. If you're on social media, you can promote the FAIRtax. If you're not on social media, just take a look at, probably the easiest thing is go to our new website, FAIRtaxGuys.com, FAIRtaxGuys.com, and then send that link to other people in your email address, and that will help get the message out. So. And another good site is Popvox, Popvox. That is a site in which you can put in your comments, either supporting or not supporting any pending legislation. After you enroll in Popvox, and you have to give them your name and your address, because then they know who your representative and who your two senators are. And you can go to HR 25. Put in comments of support, and then your comments will be mailed to your representative and both your senators, and you will get a response. So Popvox is a great site for registering your support or lack of support, like the one for the flat tax. There is a proposal in there for the flat tax. Last I saw, it had one co-sponsor. Yeah. And the question is, how long will it stay flat? Not very long. Okay.
That's what I ask anybody who tells me I'm a flat taxer. That's the one question I ask them, and to this day, not one of them has even tried to reply to that question. How long will it stay flat?
They just kind of look, and this grimace comes over their face, because you realized you asked them a question they can't really answer.
They cannot answer. I had one guy just look at me and say, "It won't." And I go, "Yep, you're right."
At least he was honest.
At least he was honest.
Well, we have a flat tax in the FICA payroll tax. It's flat up to $132,000, where it's capped, and it doesn't really stay flat. They either fiddle with the cap or they fiddle with the rate.
Yeah.
And they may raise one part of it on Social Security or raise the other part of it on Medicare, and it hasn't stayed flat for more than 5 years, ever.
So it's not a good idea. All right.
Also,
Elaine?
the FAIRtax logo store.
Yep. I didn't bring any
Go there.
of my props,
get shirts, hats.
FAIRtaxLogoStore.org. FAIRtaxLogoStore.org. You can get on there and purchase, like shirts, hats, or buttons.
Now,
or whatever.
I've seen people who have bought stickers, bumper stickers, and just put them in the window, but they don't attach them. And then they take it, like they might go to a FAIRtax meeting and they will have it in their window, but when they leave, they take it out. And I'm thinking, no, you need to leave those things on. You need to wear the buttons. You need to wear the shirts. You need to wear the caps. Always carry a few of the pocket cards with you. And when people ask you about the FAIRtax, if you're not that familiar with it, or you're not comfortable, let's say, in answering some of their questions, hand them a pocket card and say, the email address on the back, not the email, the website address on the back. Go there, go to the question and answer section, learn about the FAIRtax.
Our routine when Elaine and I go out to dinner, all right, I sign the bill, I give her the little folder, she puts in a FAIRtax pocket card, and that's what the waitress gets back.
That's the second tip they get.
Yep, so anyways. Okay, I think that about does it.
There's only one more thing.
What's that?
It's only 32 weeks before Christmas.
Thanks for
So
that.
use your Ebates, use your Amazon Smile when you're buying gifts. Make sure that you're signed up to have your rebate, if you will, or Ebate, sent to the Florida FAIRtax
No,
Educational
Ebates
Association.
goes to AFFT.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
That goes to
And
the national.
Amazon Smile.
Amazon Smile goes
Yeah.
to Florida FAIRtax
Yeah.
Educational Association.
Correct.
For Florida, it's Amazon Smile, which is very easy to sign up for. When we were told about it at our annual meeting last year, I signed up while he was telling us about it. It's very, very simple. Okay, I think that pretty much does it. We've taken up a lot of your time. I hope this has been instructive and also saved you some gas and time so
Yeah.
you don't have to drive to the meeting. Please share this link for this video with other people. And always, if you have questions, comments, suggestions, whatever, all right, you can contact
Please
us
do.
at ocalafairtax@icloud.com. ocalafairtax@icloud.com, and our webmaster gave me a second email address, and that's info@flfairtax.org. info@flfairtax.org.
Of course, if you have complaints, you send them to Randy.
Randy.fisher@fairtax.org.
There you go. So that's for both the state and the national organizations. Thanks very much. We'll send you another one of these next month, and we'll see. Maybe we'll do this statewide instead of just this area. So
Thanks for joining our virtual meeting.
yes,
Yes.
that's a good way
See
to
you
put it.
next month, guys.
All right.